Greetings, campers. Welcome to episode 27 of Campfire Ghost Stories. I hope you've had the chance to hop on over to my YouTube channel and check out my interview with Krista Joy. It was such a pleasure to have her by the campfire. We got to discuss a number of topics, including solo hiking, preparedness, and the importance of leave no trace behind practices, as well as basic safety. Sorry, that was my cat. At tonight's campfire, I will be discussing Lake Lanier. There are a multitude of camping options around Lake Lanier, including tent camping and camper options with full hookup sites. Spaces can get a bit tight in those, pristine areas, so make sure to plan accordingly and plan ahead of time. There are also camping spots along the shore, but again, plan ahead because these are some pristine, beautiful sites. And as I say that, I also want to remind campers to keep these sites in pristine shape and beautiful. Please pick up after yourself and any pets that you may have. So sites do go quickly here. Make sure to give yourself plenty of time to secure your spot. And again, if you are bringing your pet, make sure that pets are allowed in those spots. And as always, please keep up and clean up after them. Now this lake camper, it is truly a sight to behold, and it does have a lot to offer. The beaches, the food, and the mystery, and the sadness. And I have to warn you now that I will not only be talking about the ghostly tales of the lake, but also the town that was there before the lake. You see, this lake, it's man-made. It was put on top of a town. So this history isn't going to be one of the good ones. Again, this is a warning. There will be talks of attempted rape, racism, and assault. If this is something that you are not in a mentally safe place to listen to, then please feel free to shut it down, take time for yourself, and I can meet you at the next campfire. With that being said, Lake Lanier. It doesn't sound spooky, does it? It's, again, like I said, a man-made lake. What stood there before this lake was a town called Oscarville, with about 250 families living and thriving. There were farmlands, bustling businesses, and happy families. It was in all accounts a successful community for its time. Oscarville was located in a wonderful area of Georgia. It was still farmable, but still rural. So why, camper, is it now a lake? A lake that covers 38,000 acres or so? Well, to start off, racism. That's why. In the early 1900s, the town of Oscarville was a successful Black community. In all recorded accounts, a successful, happy, flourishing, and thriving community with the majority of the population being Black. Now, they were free human beings building and living their lives with their families. However, in about 1912, white farmers believed that their economic woes were because of their Black neighbors, and racial tensions began to build on that. Unfortunately, a woman named Ellen Grice, she was a young white woman, accused 2 Black men of attempting to rape her while she was sleeping in her bed in her house. And that accusation right there opened the floodgates. She had claimed 2 black men were in her room, allegedly attempting to rape her, but were scared off by her mother. However, soon after that accusation, 5 black men were arrested. All 5 believed to be in connection to this attempted rape by 2 people. A preacher by the name of Grant Smith, who was also a black man, stated that there was little to no evidence that these 5 men who were arrested were involved in this allegation. There was no real proof linking these 5 men to Grice's story of the 2 men who were in her room. Furthermore, Grant states that Grice was potentially involved with one of the black men and only cried rape when her scandalous affair was discovered. This actually became there was actually a nickname for this sort of defense called the Old Threadbare Lie. Apparently, white women who were caught having an affair or being in love with a black man and were caught would cry rape. Now, usually this was done to protect themselves from any physical harm that they might receive once it was discovered that they were seeing somebody who was darker skinned than they were. Sadly, preacher Grant Smith was attacked by a racist white mob on the courthouse steps. He was beaten and horsewhipped by these men. Though his injuries were serious and life-threatening, he did survive. Now, Ellen Grice's alleged assault occurred September 5th, 1912. 8 short days later, September 13th, May Crow was found hidden under a pile of leaves just outside Oscarville. May was about 18 to 19 years of age and came from Big Creek, which was a nearby community. She had been raped and bludgeoned with a rock to the head. She was in horrible shape, her body beaten and bruised and broken, clothes half torn off, but she was still alive when her body was discovered. Barely breathing and unconscious, but still alive. She survived in a coma for 2 weeks before her body just could not hold on, and sadly, she did pass away. Now, this was 1912, and we are already seeing that the white populace are beginning to blame the black populace for their woes and troubles, which really was nobody's fault. And if you thought any sort of crime scene investigations had occurred when May's poor body was found, then you would be sorely mistaken. No evidence was found to accuse any person or persons, but those in charge went directly to the closest black community. Someone had searched May's person and found a pocket mirror, and somehow believed that this belonged to a 16-year-old African-American child by the name of Ernest Knox. Now, this poor child was subject to so much abuse when the police came and took him. They even orchestrated a mock lynching to force him into a false confession, which just riled the angry white folks there to the point that in order to keep Ernest alive, they had to keep him in a jail, away from any family, any support. Not only was Ernest arrested, but also were his cousins, Oscar Daniel, Oscar's sister Jane, Jane's husband, Rob Edwards, and another man who just happened to live in the same community. His name was Ed Collins. Apparently, all these people had assaulted, raped, and murdered the young white woman. Now, her death is a tragedy. It's horrible. But to falsely accuse innocent people makes her death even worse, because her true murderer was never discovered. That person was free, and I can only imagine how tormented her soul must be. Now, campers, I am sharing part of this history with you of the land right now. I'm doing so because the horrors that occur on land, on any land, can leave a mark. It sours the earth. So in order for me to tell you about why Lake Lanier is now dubbed the most haunted lake in America, we have to confront the horrors that occurred in the past that has now led it to being named what it is today, the most haunted lake. 8,000 people showed up to watch a 16-year-old boy be hung for a crime he, in all accounts, had not committed, along with his cousin Oscar Daniels. If that wasn't bad enough, some white folks decided to call themselves quote-unquote night riders and would attack black folks at night for no damn reason. If you were out at night, you were a target. People, human beings, began to sell their land for way cheap in order to protect themselves and their families. They would abandon their homes and livestock and crops so that they would not be attacked. Only for those possessions, the livestock, the crops, the livestock would be killed. It didn't even matter how healthy they were. If they were abandoned by a black family, they would be killed. The animals I'm talking about, chickens, goats, cows, sheep, those types of things. The remaining human beings, the white population, would take advantage of loose laws and claim the abandoned land for themselves. After the Civil Rights March in 1987, people, the black community, tried to receive reparations for the obviously stolen land. However, the government decided, too much time has passed and the land has passed through too many hands for the government to take time and provide any requested reparations. In 1908, just 4 short years earlier, before the death of May, there was a small lake called Dunlap Dam. Now, this dam connected to Lake Warner and helped supply electricity for the neighboring folks. Georgia, if you don't know, gets hot, and as the years following the racial riots went on, there became more and more demand for water, especially for cities like Atlanta, aka Hotlanta. In response to this need, the government looked to Oscarville, which at that time, about April-ish of 1947, the Industrial Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce decided an additional dam, the Buford Dam, would help to create a man-made lake to take on this growing need for water. So there was one dam here, another dam on the opposite side, and then a big lake in between. After purchasing 56,000 acres, which was pretty much Oscarville and a few other communities around it, the government obtained this land through eminent domain. And the last white residents were then forced off of this land that they had previously taken from black families. You may be wondering, well, what about the houses? I mean, it's a whole city. There's houses, there's barns, garages, fences, sheds, cemeteries, churches, restaurants, probably a few post office and other types of shops. What happened to all of these? Well, campers, many of those structures are actually still there at the bottom of the lake, underneath the depths of Lake Lanier. Basically because the government didn't want to take the time to properly remove all of these buildings. Now, some were demolished, some were knocked down, but the rubble, still there. And many of the structures are still there. So in order for the government to hurriedly get this lake in motion, because it's no easy task to build a lake, again, a lot of corners were cut, and these structures were eventually covered up by water. Now keep in mind that there were about 20 different cemeteries that were flooded. And just to clarify, when the government received backlash for their lazy attempts at removing these structures, these buildings, they did send in a few people who went in and removed a handful of headstones. Now, at the time, the lake was about 200 feet deep. So the few folks that went in, they just grabbed a few of the headstones. Bodies are still where they lay, and relocated some of the headstones. Now, like I said, at its depth, the lake is 200 feet deep. But when it's summertime, the water does recede some. Evidence of Oscarville and other communities began to make an appearance. You can see submerged roads, tires, other automobile parts, as well as other property pieces, dishes, cups, spoons, things that would be found in a house, begin to rise from the bottom of the lake to the top. Now, as for those who were still living there, you may be thinking, well, I'm sure they got a pretty penny for the lands that the government obtained. No, sad to say, camper, that is not what happened. The first farmer to sell his land was an 81-year-old man by the name of Henry Shadeburn. Now, in 1949, he had about 100 acres. He sold this land to the government for a whopping $4,100, which in today's monies, well, that would equal about $54,000. So 100 acres, he got $4,100, or $54,000 for 100 acres. Man, oh man, oh man. Now, many tried to stand up to their government, but those with the big wallets have a way of winning through means of confusion and lies. Again, camper, I feel we need to discuss this history to be aware of the tragedies that occurred before Lake Lanier was even born. You can already tell that there's been a lot of mistrust, a lot of hurt, a lot of anger that is just seeping into this ground. Not to mention the obvious unsolved murders occurring in such a small area. That anger, those negative feelings are left to grow and fester. And there are those who believe that water allows energies like that to move around and flow back and forth. Now, with this being said, such a large body of water would make sense that there is an amount of accidents that do occur at a lake like this. It's a huge lake. But oddly, this lake has claimed roughly 1,000 lives, give or take, and has only been considered a complete lake for only about 80 years. I mean, it took time to dig and, bring the water in and then let nature kind of do its thing where the water would, recede in the summertime and then build up during the wintertime and the rainy seasons. So creating a lake like this takes time. And like I said, it's only been considered complete for about 80 years. But the death toll, it's pretty high for just 80 years. Some of the most notable and mysterious happenings, they involve many different people. many different situations, all with just a hint of, what do I want to say, suspicion. For example, on State Route 53, many people began seeing what they believe was a spirit. It was a woman. She was wearing a blue dress. Both of her hands looked like they were missing. Not cut off, not like somebody chopped off somebody else's hand and it's bleeding and bloody and, bits of skin and flesh and maybe a bone poking out. No. Just the hands were gone. And she had this look of like she was lost. She was constantly looking around. So just keep that in mind. Now, April 16th, 1958, Delia Young was driving with her friend Susie Roberts to a roadhouse with the plans of hanging out and partying, having a good time. Now, these girls had just skipped out on paying their gas bill. They had fueled up their car before they took off for this roadhouse adventure. But they were young, full of life, just wanted to go have a good time. And then they disappeared. 18 months later, a fisherman was out fishing and happened upon a body. It was in major decomp. It was believed to be the body of Delia Young. When her body was recovered, she was missing 2 toes on her left foot and both hands, and she was wearing a blue dress. In 1990, Jerry D. Jackson Bridge was in need of repairs. The waters beneath the bridge were dredged in order to get these repairs done. While the water had been dredged away, a vehicle was found. It was a Ford. It was the same vehicle that Susie Roberts had owned. Her remains, which were just bones, were found still in the driver's seats. With the use of dental records, it was confirmed this was Susie. This was her body. This was her car. And no one can discern what caused the crash. No one knows what the ghost of Delia Young is still searching for. Is she searching for help? Is she searching for Susie? We just don't know. A body was discovered. It was badly decomposed. A coroner's report stated the person had drowned. What was odd is that there was a single gunshot to the back of the head. The body was discovered to be that of Kelly Nash. On January 5th, 2015, Kelly told his girlfriend that he was going to go visit his doctor because he was suffering from some major chronic sinus issues. Kelly told his girlfriend that he would be back later. The next day, his girlfriend gets up. She finds that Kelly's truck is still in the driveway, and his belongings, his keys, his wallet, they're still in the house. Nobody can find Kelly. No one knows what happened when Kelly walked out the door. The body that was found was confirmed to be that of Kelly Nash, and he was still wearing the same clothes he had been wearing when he disappeared. So what caused him to go outside without his wallet, without his keys, just wearing the clothes on his back? Strange drownings involve people who, for all accounts, are strong swimmers. In fact, these people who drowned, their family, their friends, just can't understand. They were such great swimmers. They were strong. They were young. They had the skills necessary and the strength to go out on just a simple swim in a lake. For reasons unknown, these swimmers, they're just pulled under, drowned, with, luckily, for some, their bodies are later discovered, but still no rhyme or reason. Now, there are some who have survived these odd happenings. They all say the same thing. They were fine, swimming along as if it was just another day. Nothing weird was going on that they could tell. Until they feel something grab them. Something grabs their legs and pulls them down. It feels like hands. Now, for these lucky few, they are able to fight their way back to the surface, pull themselves out of the water. But there's nobody else that comes up. Nobody who comes up saying, "Oh, it was just me. It was a joke. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just messing around." No. Nobody knows who pulls on them. And if it isn't ghostly hands pulling people down into the murky depths, there are other sightings, campers. These sightings do not just occur on the water, but also on shore. There are the sounds of church bells that can be heard while walking along the beach at night. And we have even received sightings of apparitions moving around homes that are located on the water's edge. Others may hear hurried footsteps and doors slamming shut from, in all accounts, are abandoned houses. It would definitely make for an interesting night stroll if you ask me. Actually, if you ask me, I would probably go with you on that stroll. So, in the grand scheme of things, this lake is a lake to be careful in, okay? According to Newsweek, as of their last tally for the year of 2023, Lake Lanier has been involved with 13 deaths just for that year. Since 1994, there have been over 160 deaths reported. Now, that's not going to stop all of us from going to the lake, but that might cause us to take just a few precautions. Maybe get, some of those floaties. Now, there's a lot of deaths that occur, and many suspect it is those spirits that have been wronged. I mean, like I said, look at the history. In a snapshot, the government chased off the last few white folks that were still living there. The white folks had chased off the black folks that were living there. There were unsolved murders. There were the murders of innocent people. And even before then, there was the chasing off of the the indigenous people, the Native Americans that were living there even beforehand. The list goes on and on. This area was just an area that nobody was able to hold on to. And what about those missing bodies? There are accidents. Accidents have happened. Boats have collided into other boats. Boaters have hit people on inner tubes. It does happen. But the bodies, there are still missing bodies. Did they just sink into oblivion? Did those arms that seemed to come up and grab swimmers, did those arms take the deceased ones too, accepting them into their watery depths? It's a theory. It's a thought. Some believe it is the haphazardness caused by the government's sidestepping of properly removing buildings and other structures believing that maybe debris and rubble that was left behind somehow floats to the surface, gets in the way of the boats, or maybe it happens to, I don't know, tangle around a swimmer's legs. It could. There is, the potential for tossed garbage and other things that, could cause some sort of obstruction, although they're not found when these accidents happen. It's an interesting theory. It's one that many are trying to look into. However, there are other bodies of water naturally made where boats and accidents and things like that do happen, but they still do not have the legend that Lake Lanier has. They don't have and I hate to say it, the body count that Lake Lanier has. No, there's just something about Lake Lanier sitting on top of a city, sitting on top of graves, sitting on top of agonizing memories that just strikes a chord with people. It's definitely got more going on than just boat rides, that's for sure, camper. Oh, and the name. Well, sadly, it isn't something that has to do with anyone from Oscarville or any of those who had tragically lost their lives. The name Lake Lanier is named after Sidney Lanier. And Sidney Lanier was a poet and a musician who was a Georgia native, just not from Oscarville. He, in fact, wrote a poem, and the poem is called The Song of the Chattahoochee, which described the beauty and vastness of that area. Now, this isn't to say anything negative about Sidney Lanier. Not only was he a poet and a musician, Sidney was also a lawyer and an academic who taught at the Johns Hopkins University. And he even played with the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, so he was a pretty interesting and well-rounded person. Interestingly, in 2021, Congress decided that they needed to change the name of any assets, and I'm throwing up my air quotes, assets, that means cities and places and even lakes like Lake Lanier and other bodies of water. Again, this is the government's assets. They wanted to change the name that may in any way commemorate the Confederate States of America or anybody who maybe serviced voluntarily with the Confederacy. They wanted to get rid of those names. A survey was ran for 7 days from March 10th to March 16th in 2023 to gather opinions on Lake Lanier community. They wanted to know if they forced to change the name, what would people think? Now, during this 7-day survey, they received 1,171 total responses. All in all, 97.10% of the votes were against changing the name. However, if Congress required that the name be changed, then 64.73% said they would support the name change from Lake Sidney Lanier to Lake Lanier. So there you have it, campers. A lake with beautiful beaches, warm waters, sights to see, food to eat, and history to explore. And if you're lucky, you'll make it through the night to tell the tale. Well, camper, I hope you enjoyed hearing about Lake Lanier. If you're looking for sun, surf, and a bit of spookiness, I definitely suggest that you make plans to stop down in Georgia and take a visit. And I hope you've had a chance to check out my YouTube channel, Campfire Ghost Stories, while I will be sharing a number of interviews with solo campers and hikers. In fact, my next interview will be with Deb from Deb's RV Service, and that will come out on Thursday, February 13th. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. Remember to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the interviews. And I will be sharing recipes soon to come. Now, these recipes, which I'm compiling now, are for those who, like me, have some GI issues. So if you suffer from things like IBS, gastritis, gallbladder issues, GERD, gluten allergies, things like that, stay tuned as I get some recipes that have helped me and maybe they can help you. I am also preparing for my first camping trip of the year, and we will actually be going to a cabin. Yes, a cabin. So keep an ear out and an eye out as I share how we prepare to go to the cabin and what we're going to do at the cabin and what I think about this cabin, because I haven't been to this cabin yet. So if you have a story you want to share or would like to share some of your camping adventures, feel free to send me a message. I would love to hear it, and maybe we can share it on the channel. You can send me an email to campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. That's campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. Remember to always take care of yourself. The green is always out there, and it doesn't judge you. You are always welcome in the green. You are always welcome at my campfire. I hope to see you at the next campsite, and happy camping.